The clatter and banging at the front gate jolted me from my thoughts. My husband was outside, fuming and pounding on the door. "Are you serious? Let me in right now. Do you want the whole neighborhood to see this?" It was a chilly Christmas evening, and instead of joy, he was creating the scene outside my family's home. Christmas had always been a time for celebration and togetherness, but this year was tainted by a painful discovery I had made just days earlier. I had stumbled upon an envelope that revealed his infidelities. As both a wife and a mother, I felt utterly betrayed and hopeless. He claimed to be working late, but in reality, he was squandering our savings on an affair, barely spending anything on gifts for our children. Unable to bear the weight of my emotions any longer, I flung open the door and confronted him, my family standing by, the air thick with tension. "What's happening?" he asked, feigning ignorance. Life as an ordinary housewife, living with my husband and our 2 kids, had seemed straightforward until then. Depending on personal values, some might choose to juggle relationships, spending Christmas Eve with a lover and Christmas Day with family. My siblings and I grew up in a household that didn't adhere to conventional celebration dates due to our parents demanding jobs, so we created our own traditions. We celebrated Christmas during winter break, cooking together, enjoying cake, and watching special year-end TV shows. As I grew older and started my own family, Christmas Eve remained a joyful celebration with my husband and our child. However, as the years passed, the essence of our relationship shifted from romance to a family-centric dynamic. Christmas Eve gradually became less about us and more about ensuring our children's happiness. We adapted, agreeing that their joy was paramount. So when my husband casually mentioned he might be stuck at work overnight on the 28th, it didn't initially raise any alarms. I saw it as just another twist in our evolving holiday traditions. But discovering his betrayal changed everything, transforming our holiday into a moment of stark confrontation. The realization that my husband wouldn't be home for Christmas Eve only emphasized how much our relationship had evolved. Despite the changes, my feelings for him remained deep-rooted, and I found contentment in our shared life. I dedicated myself to preparing a joyful Christmas for our kids, embracing it as another form of happiness. "Is this all we have for living expenses this month? Did something happen with your paycheck?" I asked, trying to keep my tone measured. As the year came to a close, expenses always seemed to multiply, and I hoped we could stretch our budget a bit further with Christmas just around the corner. I was stunned to discover that the money he had set aside for living expenses was noticeably less than usual. I gently probed further, wondering how I could manage with this shortfall. "Things are tight on my end too," I admitted, thinking about the work-related expenses and upfront costs for the new year. "Do you think I enjoy having to cut back this much?" Navigating our budget with limited resources had become a central part of my role as a housewife. My husband, visibly stressed, avoided delving deeper into the discussion. "You're right, I'm sorry. I'll do my best. But remember, it's almost Christmas and the kids are really looking forward to their presents. Let's try to make this season special for their sake. I don't want us to fall short." In our family, we usually had a rule: if the kids wanted something, they had to explain why they needed it. However, on birthdays and Christmas, they were free to ask for anything. That's why I was determined to ensure we had enough funds for their wishes, especially given their deep love for Christmas. "Let's be a bit more cautious with our spending," I suggested, turning to the kids. "What do you want for Christmas?" My husband sighed and gathered the children close. "I want a cartoon DVD set, but I also really want a picture book about trains, Dad. Which one do you think is better?" "The book, definitely. It'll help you learn to read, and you can share it with your friends. You could even read it to your younger friends. You'd be such a cool big boy." "I really want a new doll set so I can feed it and sleep with it," our daughter chimed in, looking a bit troubled. "But my crayons broke recently, and now I can't draw." "Crayons would be great, Carol. You're so talented at drawing," I encouraged, hoping to balance their wishes with our budget constraints. The simple yet profound joys of parenting shone through these moments as we navigated the season's challenges together. As I watched my daughter sketch, I suggested, "Why not ask Santa for some nice crayons, even better than the ones you had before?" But she was also eyeing that new doll set. "What about the dolls? Can't you listen to what I want?" she replied. "Remember, Santa only visits good children. Naughty kids who are selfish get nothing," I reassured her. "Let's ask for the crayons first." While I tried to balance the children's wishes, my husband nudged them toward more affordable options. Brian's gift can come from a used bookstore, and Carol's can be from the discount store, he suggested quietly, implying this approach would help us avoid overspending during the festive season. Do you think spending money is the only solution? How foolish, he murmured under his breath, ensuring only I could hear. By labeling our children's eagerly awaited gifts as mere extra expenses, he subtly steered their young minds to fit his frugal agenda, which began to sow seeds of resentment in me. One evening, while my husband bathed our daughter, she came running in with a sparkly envelope she found in his work bag. "Mom, look, could it be from Santa?" Although it wasn't right for her to rummage through his things, my curiosity was piqued. "You shouldn't have taken that without asking. Give it here, and I'll put it back," I said. But when I took the envelope, curiosity got the better of me, and I peeked inside. It was a reservation for a Christmas dinner for two at a hotel on the 28th, the night he claimed he would be working. Questions and doubts flooded my mind just then as my husband's phone pinged with a notification. Startled, I glanced over to see a flurry of incoming messages. Normally, I would have thought nothing of it, but tonight felt different. I tried not to pry, but an unsettling feeling compelled me to check. All the messages were from someone named Tiffany, punctuated by heart emojis and featuring a profile picture of a woman much younger than I was. The pieces began to fall into place, painting a troubling picture. With each passing day, I found myself sneaking glances at his phone, confirming my suspicions. It was becoming clear that Tiffany was likely his mistress, and he had plans to spend Christmas Eve with her, possibly even hinting at a special gift. Driven by a mix of hurt and determination, I made the decision to hire a private investigator. Catching my overly confident husband in the act seemed like the only way to confront this painful reality head-on. The days leading up to Christmas were filled with a heavy mix of dread and resolve as I prepared to face whatever truths the investigation would uncover. When the results finally arrived, they confirmed my worst fears. Tiffany was an employee at my husband's company, and their affair had begun just a month ago. All those late nights he claimed to be working had really been spent with her. The sudden reduction in her household funds was likely being funneled into his affair. Holding the investigator's report, tears of frustration and betrayal spilled over. In just a month, my husband had shifted his priorities so drastically, favoring another woman over his own family. My diligent care for our home, grounded in the belief that he was overwhelmed with work, and our children's quiet longing for time with their father now seemed tragically misplaced. The revelation of his betrayal was too profound to ignore. Initially paralyzed by shock, determination soon took hold. I wasn't going to let this slide without taking action. Drying my tears, I channeled my energy into planning a decisive response for the morning of December 28th. I kept up a normal facade as I sent my husband off to work, but once he was gone, I packed the kids and headed to my parents' house. "It's been so long since we've all been together like this," my mom exclaimed upon our arrival. The festive spirit at my parents' home was infectious. We spent the day decorating a large Christmas tree and enjoying a joyful holiday party. The next morning, the children were ecstatic about the gifts waiting for them under the tree: a DVD and a picture book for my son, and a doll and some crayons for my daughter, all presented as gifts from Santa and their grandparents. As they played happily with their new toys, the adults looked on with content smiles. Suddenly, my phone buzzed. Stepping outside to answer, I heard my husband's distressed voice. "Hey, where are you? I just got home from work, but my key doesn't fit the lock, and the doorbell isn't working. What's going on?" I could hear him fumbling with the door handle through the phone. "Calm down. You're making a scene. No one is there because we don't live there anymore. We finished moving out yesterday. You were too busy with work to notice. And by the way, if you keep shaking that door, it might break." "If it does, that's not my problem," I replied, a mix of sternness and mockery lacing my voice. As I watched my daughter sketch, I encouraged her. "Ask Santa for some nice crayons. Better than the ones you had before." She had her eye on a new doll set too. "But what about the dolls? Can't you listen to what I want? Santa only visits good children." "Naughty kids who are selfish get nothing," she protested. I reassured her, "Let's ask for the crayons first." While I tried to balance the children's wishes, my husband nudged them toward more affordable options. "Brian's gift can come from a used bookstore, and Carol's can be from the store," he suggested quietly, implying this approach would help us avoid overspending during the holiday season. Do you think spending money is the only solution? How foolish, he muttered under his breath, ensuring I could hear him. He labeled our children's eagerly awaited gifts as mere extra expenses, subtly steering their young minds to fit his frugal agenda, which began to sow seeds of resentment within me. One evening, as my husband was bathing our daughter, she came running with a sparkly envelope she had found in his work bag. "Mom, look, could it be from Santa?" Though it was wrong for her to rummage through his things, my curiosity was piqued. "You shouldn't have taken that without asking. Give it here, and I'll put it back." But when I took the envelope, my curiosity got the better of me, and I peeked inside. It was a reservation for a Christmas dinner for two at a hotel on the 28th, the night he was supposedly working. Questions and doubts flooded my mind. Just then, a notification pinged from my husband's phone. Startled, I glanced over and saw a flurry of incoming messages. I wouldn't usually pry, but an unsettling feeling pushed me to check my husband's messages. They were all from someone named Tiffany, complete with heart emojis and a profile picture of a woman much younger than me. As the pieces began to fall into place, a troubling picture emerged. With each passing day, I found myself sneaking glances at his phone, confirming my suspicions that Tiffany was likely his mistress and that he planned to spend Christmas Eve with her. He even hinted at a special gift. Driven by a mix of hurt and determination, I decided to hire a private investigator. Catching my overly confident husband in the act seemed like the only way to confront this painful reality. The days leading up to Christmas were filled with dread and resolve as I braced myself for the truths the investigation would reveal. When the results arrived, they confirmed my worst fears. Tiffany was an employee at my husband's company, and their affair had started just a month ago. All those late nights he claimed were spent working were actually with her. The sudden dip in our household funds likely funneled into his affair. Holding the investigator's report, tears of frustration and betrayal flowed freely. In just a month, my husband had completely shifted his priorities, favoring another woman over his own family. My diligent care for our home, under the belief that he was burdened with work, and our children's quiet longing for time with their father now felt tragically misplaced. His betrayal was too profound to ignore. Initially, I was paralyzed by shock, but soon determination took over. I refused to let this situation go unaddressed. Wiping my tears, I channeled my energy into planning a decisive response. On the morning of December 28th, I kept up appearances as I sent my husband off to work. But once he was gone, I packed the kids and moved to my parents' house. "It's been so long since we've all been together like this," my mom exclaimed as we arrived. The festive spirit in their home was uplifting. We spent the day decorating a large Christmas tree and enjoying a joyful holiday party. The next morning, the children were thrilled to find gifts under the tree: a DVD and a picture book for my son, and a doll and crayons for my daughter, all presented as gifts from Santa and their grandparents. As they played happily with their new toys, the adults watched with content smiles. Then, my phone buzzed. Stepping outside to answer, I heard my husband's distressed voice. "Hey, where are you? I just got home from work, but my key doesn't fit the lock, and the doorbell isn't working. What's going on? What's going on?" I could hear him fumbling with the door handle through the phone. "Calm down. You're making a lot of noise. No one's there because we don't live there anymore. We finished moving out yesterday. You were too busy with work to notice. And by the way, if you keep shaking that door, it might break." "If it does, that's not my problem," I replied, my tone a mix of sternness and mockery. I followed my parents to the front door, bracing myself for a confrontation. When my father swung the door open, my husband stood there with a defiant smirk on his face. "Long time no see, Dad," he said, a sly grin plastered across his lips. But my father's response was icy. "It's not good to see you. Stop pretending we're friends. You're no longer a son to us. Just someone who hurt our family." My mother joined in, her tone sharp and unyielding. "Do you even know what time it is? It's incredibly rude to show up like this. The kids have been asleep for hours. You're not fit to be their father," she declared, her stern glare shocking him, as he was unaccustomed to her usual gentleness. "I won't let my grandchildren witness this anymore. Leave now. You're a nuisance and no longer part of this family," my father-in-law stated calmly, his voice laced with anger, making it clear that it was time for my husband to go. Faced with the united front of my family, my husband's expression darkened as if he might lash out. But before he could respond, my mother-in-law intervened firmly. I'm calling the police right now." Seeing her reach for the phone sent him into a panic, and he fled the scene without uttering a single apology, a stark reminder of his true character. At that moment, I didn't shed any more tears. Instead, a profound emptiness enveloped me, leaving me to ponder the purpose of all I had endured. "How about some warm tea? Then you can get some rest," my mother suggested gently, touching my shoulder with a comforting smile. The warmth and understanding from my family surrounded me as I retreated to my room, grateful for their unwavering support. Meanwhile, my estranged husband, finding himself without a home, attempted to return to his parents' house, only to discover that they had changed the locks. After hearing my side of the story, they turned him away, unwilling to let a stranger disrupt their peace. Left out in the cold, my husband finally grasped the gravity of his actions and the weight of his parents' words. Now, truly understanding the consequences, he expressed sincere regret and agreed to the terms of our divorce without a legal battle. I had a lawyer ready, just in case. Fortunately, the proceedings concluded smoothly. I began anew at my parents' house, a sanctuary for myself and my children. Amidst the challenges of balancing work and parenting, every day brimmed with purpose, supported by the love and help of my parents. Life was bustling but deeply fulfilling. Even though my marriage had ended and I would not see my ex-husband again, I maintained a strong connection with my former in-laws. They were wonderful grandparents, offering not just love to my children but also tremendous support to me. Despite the official documents declaring us no longer family, I cherished their presence in our lives and hoped they would remain a constant as I watched the children grow and flourish. Do you both have everything? Let's go, and don't forget to say goodbye to Grandma and Grandpa, I reminded my kids as we got ready to leave their house. Bye. We called out, and I sent a silent prayer for these peaceful, ordinary days to continue indefinitely. I looked forward to celebrating next Christmas together, imagining the bright smiles on my children's faces as we gathered around, a testament to our resilience and the new bonds we forged. This thought alone added a lightness to my step, fueling my hope for many joy-filled years ahead.
Sorry, it seems like there's a child involved. Normally, a husband's confession about having a child with a woman other than his wife would lead to divorce, especially when he seems to imply that he wants a divorce because of the child. The awkward husband, perhaps out of guilt, shrank back. A flamboyant woman beside him deliberately rubbed her stomach. Well, getting a divorce is simple, but before that, I have something to say. Will you listen to me one last time? I started explaining slowly so that my husband could understand. The woman's face, full of anxiety, glanced at the exit. I'm not an investigator or detective, and I know my conclusion won't change. But I figured if my husband could be happy in the end, then that's fine. My name is Sarah, and I work as an office employee. A year ago, I married my husband, John. I met him at work. He works in the information systems department. Initially, he was in the accounting department, but when asked to handle sudden revisions or changes after submitting documents, he struggled. This led to panic during the year-end rush. That's why he was transferred to the quality control department. When I heard this story through rumors, I thought he was just sensitive. But after we started dating, I realized it wasn't a matter that could be dismissed as simply as his personality. My husband has a developmental trait. Specifically, he falls into the passive type. He's hesitant to make decisions or express his own will. From childhood, he was academically excellent, so his family didn't realize there might be an issue. Smart children who say unusual things are often seen as geniuses. While some children may genuinely be geniuses, developmental traits can sometimes cause behaviors or statements that others may dismiss with, "Oh, you're just quirky." But as adults, it's no longer that simple. Especially in a corporate setting, where adjusting your words based on the atmosphere is often expected. Those who speak their mind, without filtering, might find themselves without a place to belong. This is understandable in a society that values tact. However, my husband couldn't grasp that concept. He would make remarks without realizing they were inappropriate. This often left people around him uncomfortable or upset. For instance, he once blurted out a superior's secret in front of the boss himself. He didn't realize the problem in doing so. Even though he wasn't trying to cause harm, He'd report who said what. This naturally led to strained relationships, increasing isolation for him. Perhaps, if we'd realized his trait earlier, we could have taken steps to minimize such trouble. However, his father was convinced his son was a genius. He refused to take him to a specialist. This was despite his mother's suggestions. While I understand his father's hopes, addressing developmental issues is more helpful to the individual than relying solely on expectations. So why did I decide to marry him? I felt that without my support, it would be hard for him to live in society. I asked whether that was love. I wouldn't be confident in my answer. I grew up watching my own family members struggle with stronger developmental traits than my husband's. In an era where there was far less information and understanding about such developmental challenges, my mother worked tirelessly. She wanted to ensure my family member could survive on his own. While my relative now manages to make ends meet through manual labor, that too was only possible because of parental connections. When I met John and realized his awkwardness, I immediately thought of my relative. I was less surprised by his behavior because I had developed an immunity to such traits. John is not a bad person. In fact, he's extremely earnest. He's never late or cutting corners. He follows routines diligently. As long as there's no hidden changes, he doesn't make mistakes at work. I wanted him to stay happy and secure in his position. Though he struggles with relationships, I found out that he's actually bisexual. This surprised me, given his shy nature. His ex-wife, Lisa, approached him after getting pregnant, saying she wanted to marry him because of the child. But after dealing with pregnancy blues and other mental health issues, she left, never to return. Strangely, neither John nor his mother could recall how far along Lisa was. Though they had shared stories from prenatal visits, neither had seen an ultrasound photo. At this point, there was no way to verify anything. But I suspect that John was deceived. Lisa may have tricked him into providing money for childbirth, only to disappear later. Even though I feel for John, I've come to a decision. We don't need to have children. While it would be a lie to say I'd want kids, forcing it under these circumstances would be unwise. As time went on, John and I settled into our marriage. But I couldn't shake the feeling that things weren't entirely secure. John, despite his awkwardness with people, had a hidden vulnerability. He wasn't the type to be aggressive with women, so finding out he was bisexual came as a shock. It seemed unlikely at first, but then I learned more from his mother. His ex-wife Lisa had said she wanted to marry him because she was pregnant. He agreed, but it didn't last. Lisa had developed severe depression and left John, saying she didn't want to burden him anymore. Even though she left with the child still in her, neither John nor his mother could explain how many months along she was. I asked about the prenatal visits. They mentioned them, but hadn't shared a single ultrasound photo with John. So I wondered, was John tricked? His mother Natalie, too, suspected that Lisa had deceived John. I'm certain he was tricked, Sarah. Don't you think so? What did John say? He doesn't question things. He takes everything people say at face value. He just believed her when she said she needed the money. And what about the others around him? Oh, they tried to warn him, but it was no use. Please, Sarah, you have to protect him from being taken advantage of again. I understood Natalie's concern, but balancing my own life with caring for him seemed overwhelming. After thinking it over, I decided we didn't need to have children. I don't need kids right now. It's not that I don't want them. But forcing a family under these circumstances would only lead to more problems. I doubted John would ever bring up family planning himself. He wasn't the proactive type. Our marriage seemed like a journey where I was pulling all the weight, and I was okay with that at the time. A while later, I began talking to Mark, one of John's co-workers. He wasn't particularly close to John, but he knew him from their university days. I heard about John's panic attack in accounting. Mark said he was asked to keep an eye on John when things got tough. He gradually understood how to handle him, learning about his developmental issues. His ex-wife, Lisa, told him she was pregnant, and I'm convinced she was lying. You really think so? I mean, it's not good to be suspicious, but it does sound off. Yeah, I mean, he just disappears like that. And the fact that neither he nor his mother ever saw an ultrasound photo? It's all too strange. I sipped my coffee, processing everything. John was lucky to have people like Mark looking out for him, even if he didn't realize it. But that didn't change the fact that John wasn't able to navigate these situations on his own. Actually, John met Lisa at a nightclub. Wait, really? I heard she was glamorous. Yeah, they met during a work party. A bunch of people were out drinking and decided to head to a club afterward. For someone like John, who has trouble even talking to people, it seems strange that he'd end up with someone like her. At first, we were all like, wow, good for John. But the more I heard, the more I thought, this doesn't sound right. Yeah, knowing John, he wouldn't have been able to tell if she was serious or not. Exactly. He probably believed everything she said without question. He's always been so trusting. That was the problem. John couldn't tell when someone was lying to him, which made him vulnerable. That's why he never should have gone to places like that. I know. He probably felt special when she complimented him. Exactly. And when someone like Lisa says they love him, he takes it literally. I need to compliment him more at home. It's not about liking or disliking. He told me she said she needed money for her sister's surgery. That sounds like a typical excuse used in those kinds of places. Exactly. Her story was about her parents disappearing and her sister being sick. But after he gave her money for the baby, she vanished. So she wasn't planning on staying with him from the beginning. It was clear that Lisa had probably seen how easily John could be manipulated. I wish someone had stopped him from going back to that club. Mark smiled bitterly. If only John had a wife like you back then. We made sure no one invites him to clubs anymore. He's too easy on target. It was nice to know that people like Mark were looking out for John at work. But no matter how many people tried to help, it didn't seem to change things. John's social struggles weren't going to disappear. It's not like he'd go to a club on his own. He needs someone to take him there. The only time he would go out drinking is during a company party. Company parties were mandatory, and the culture in our company still held on to the tradition. No one wanted to be the one to say no, especially at events like farewell parties or year-end gatherings. If John came home after drinking, everything would be fine as long as he came straight home. I believed he wouldn't make the same mistake twice. After all, surely no one in the company would try to take advantage of him again. Or so I thought. But if I was wrong, it was because I underestimated how easily John could be influenced. While the first year of our marriage went smoothly, things slowly started to change. At work, John had been placed in a team where he didn't have to interact with many people. This helped reduce his stress, but corporate environments always change. Even if they tried to make accommodations for him, it wasn't always perfect. When the head of the quality control department, Mr. Forrest, was transferred from another office, I began to worry. Sure enough, Mr. Forrest wanted to make a big impression with reforms. John's behavior quickly started to irritate him. John couldn't pick up on indirect cues or understand metaphors. Even when Mr. Forrest's tone became aggressive, John couldn't grasp what he was doing wrong. I don't understand what's not in the manual. I can't handle sudden changes. There was no instruction, so I didn't do anything. John wasn't trying to be defiant, but simply explaining how things were for him. But Mr. Forrest didn't get that. The once peaceful work environment around John began to get noisy. Being questioned and scolded without understanding why is one of John's biggest fears. It reminded him of his experience with teachers, bosses, and supervisors, who all had the same reaction to him over the years. For people like John, who struggle with developmental issues, being constantly told they're wrong can seriously harm their self-esteem. It makes them feel like they don't belong. This feeling of being different only increases the difficulty they have in functioning in society. I did everything I could to support him at home. I made sure to cook his favorite meals every day. I kept the house spotless, and I recorded all the shows and movies he liked so he could watch them whenever he wanted. On his days off, I encouraged him to rest, and I tried to take vacation days with him when I could. We went to the beach and visited bookstores. I even took him to his favorite hobby shop, where he could browse through model kits. I thought I was doing everything I could, but I hadn't realized something important. John couldn't pick up on my efforts to make him happy. He didn't understand the subtle emotional cues that I thought I was giving. I was trying to avoid saying things like cheer up or don't worry, but I guess that wasn't what he needed. Eventually, John began taking more days off from work. Every time he tried to get up in the morning, he felt sick. It was clearly stress-related. By the time John had used up all his paid leave, troubling rumors reached my ears. I'm worried about him. It seems like he just isn't getting along with his new boss. John's new boss didn't seem to understand his developmental challenges. Even though the department was supposed to accommodate more sensitive employees, the boss had come in from headquarters, eager to leave his mark. Everything just seems to be the worst possible fit. Yeah, people even told John to try to make amends with his boss. But you know how that goes with John. And of course, John said exactly what he was thinking out loud. His boss exploded. Apparently, the boss started yelling, saying John's attitude was terrible. He went on a rant about how spoiled young people are today. It wasn't long before John's position in the department became shaky. If things keep going like this, John will get kicked out of the department for sure. Yeah, he's not good at reporting or apologizing right away when he makes a mistake. If it's clearly his fault, he'll apologize. But if he thinks the problem is due to something unexpected, he won't. Yeah, especially if the boss is clueless about the technical side of things. Apparently, there were corporate politics at play, and that boss was slotted in because of timing. People like Mark were trying to figure out how to help John, but I knew the company couldn't bend over backwards for just one employee indefinitely. As an organization, it needed to stay profitable, and paying special attention to one person forever wasn't realistic. I just hope he doesn't snap or try to blow off steam in some destructive way. Mark's words gave me a bad feeling. Why do you say that? Do you know something? I started to notice that John had been coming home later than usual. He's usually so strict about his routine. He drinks, but he's not a heavy drinker. He doesn't gamble because he can't stand the noise or smell of smoke. If he were stopping by his parents' house, I'm sure his mom would have told me. There was a welcome party for the new boss in your husband's department recently. I didn't know it was a welcome party, but John did come home really drunk once. Someone must have helped him get a taxi. Mark's face darkened, and I started to worry that John had done something while drunk. There's this rumor. One of the younger women in the department, a girl named Hannah, seems to like John. What? I haven't heard anything like that. I know my husband isn't the type to attract attention. He's not the ambitious, outgoing sort that younger women would find charming. Honestly, John isn't the type to get promoted, and he's difficult to deal with. It seems strange that anyone would take a liking to him. I just heard it recently myself. The thing is, after that welcome party, she was the one who helped him into a taxi. It was this girl, Hannah. Wait, she helped him? Isn't it strange for a young woman to take a drunk man to a taxi by herself? You're missing the point, Sarah. He was probably leaning on her, and they were likely together until late. The party had ended around 10 p.m., but John didn't come home until after 2 a.m. He stumbled in half asleep, with his shirt unbuttoned and his tie hanging loose. Could they have gone somewhere together after the party? But he was too drunk. I can't imagine him trying to flirt with anyone in that state. Mark, however, seemed convinced something was up. He suspected that Hannah's interest in John might have led to more than just helping him into a cab. And John, being oblivious, wouldn't have realized what was happening. Is that why he's been coming home late recently? Could they really be seeing each other? About 2 months after that night, John brought Hannah to our home. He asked his parents to come too, but only his mother showed up. His father, who had never fully accepted that John couldn't fit into society like others, refused to attend. Sorry, it seems like she's pregnant. So, it's true. I let out a sigh as I realized Mark's prediction had been correct. John, who couldn't handle sudden changes, looked utterly lost. He seemed to be struggling to explain his situation. You've gotten someone else pregnant, haven't you? I could tell from his brief words that he wanted to divorce me. His simple sorry carried so much weight. Well, getting a divorce is easy, but before that, I want to talk. Disappointment and resignation filled my voice as I looked at John. John, awkward and full of guilt, shrank even more. Beside him, Hannah rubbed her supposedly pregnant belly in an exaggerated way. She wore a revealing camisole with a sheer cardigan over it, showing off her stomach, which still seemed flat. Her slim jeans looked far too tight for someone expecting a baby. I couldn't help but notice how different her casual clothes were from the work attire she usually wore. It made me question how far along she actually was. By the time a woman can confirm she's pregnant, her body typically starts to show signs. But Hannah didn't seem to be concerned about keeping her body warm, as her outfit suggested otherwise. John, you're married to me, but you're choosing someone else because she's pregnant? Is that why you're thinking of leaving? Couldn't you have considered staying with me instead of just deciding you need to leave? Hannah's irritation was obvious. She probably didn't want me to ask these questions. John, however, was silent, either unsure of how to respond or genuinely unaware of what was happening. Before we got married, didn't someone else tell you they were pregnant? And that's why you married them? I was referring to his ex-wife Lisa, who had run off. John put his hand to his forehead, as if trying to block out the memory. Hannah, are you sure you're pregnant? Yes, I am. Just to confirm, you knew John was married, right? Yes, of course. He was wearing his wedding ring. But you still got involved with him? I thought it was okay if it was just my one-sided crush. But at a company party, we both drank a lot, and I told him I liked him. I see. That's not exactly an unusual story. John's the type who can't lie. He also can't see through other people's lies. When you told him you liked him, do you remember what he said? I calmly turned my gaze to John, quietly asking him the question. I'm sorry, I don't remember. I was so drunk that night that I barely remember anything. I asked him if we could just pretend to be a couple for a little while. After that, I thought I'd just forget about it. But then I got pregnant, and now we can't undo that. Hearing this young woman utter such pitiful lines, even if they were a lie, made me feel embarrassed for John. It wasn't his fault that he couldn't see through deception, but it frustrated me nonetheless. It wasn't John's fault that he couldn't see through deception, but I had chosen to focus on his developmental challenges rather than building our own family. Even though he had already made the same mistake once before, here he was again, choosing another woman over me. Whether Hannah's pregnancy was real or not, it was clear that John couldn't make the right decision without help. I wondered how far I was supposed to go to protect him from himself. So, John, you're really sure you're the father? John's face looked confused. He clearly didn't know how to answer. You said you barely remember that night, right? Yeah, I was really drunk. Hannah flinched slightly, her confidence starting to crack. That night, the boss kept picking on me, saying all kinds of sarcastic things, so I just kept drinking and drinking to get through it. That must have been tough. I tried my best to make you happy at home. But if you didn't feel it, then I guess it didn't matter. No, Sarah, it's not your fault. I didn't understand everything you did for me. I'm sorry. Everyone at work noticed how stressed you were, John. They even tried to help by looking into solutions. Can I bring in someone who's been looking out for you? John nodded slightly, looking confused but hopeful. Hannah, however, started to look uneasy. I called the person who had been waiting at a nearby convenience store. Mark showed up almost immediately, ready to support John. Sorry to surprise you, John. I've been hearing about the stress you've been under from your new boss, so I did a little investigating to see if there was anything we could do to help. Investigating? That sounds like stalking. Hannah's demeanor shifted quickly from pitiful to defensive, and her voice sharpened. Stalking? No, I'd say what you and your sister did to John counts more as manipulation. Sister? Let's cut to the chase. John, you're being deceived again, just like with your ex-wife. There's no baby. And guess what? Hannah here is Lisa's young sister. John's brow furrowed in confusion. What? No, I don't know her sister. You've got the wrong person. I'm an only child. Funny, because I spoke to some of your colleagues, and they told me your sister used to work at our company. She got fired for moonlighting at a nightclub. Apparently, Lisa bragged about scamming a guy for money after pretending to be pregnant. John's face went pale as the realization began to set in. He looked over at Hannah, searching her face for answers. Are you really Lisa's sister? No, I swear I'm not. I really am pregnant. You spoke to my doctor on the phone, didn't you? Yeah, I did. A woman called and said you were at risk and needed to be in a special hospital. Which hospital was it, Hannah? If your condition is serious, we need to make sure you're getting the best care. I don't want to say. If John has already spoken to your doctor, why not let him call again to confirm everything? Hannah squirmed in her seat, clearly uncomfortable with where this conversation was heading. I don't want to talk about it anymore. Then just tell us the name of the hospital. If you're telling the truth, there's nothing to hide, right? At this point, even John's mother, who had been quiet, couldn't hold back anymore. The doctors should have introduced themselves by name if they were real, and they never discussed money directly with patients, especially not in that way. Right, John? Remember what happened with Lisa? The same thing is happening here. She used the same tactics, and this time, Hannah is playing the same game. But she's sick, and she said there's a baby. John, you're being scammed. Again, and this time, it's a family affair. Stop it. Stop accusing me of things I didn't do. Then prove us wrong. Let us call the hospital right now. Hannah's face twisted with frustration. She knew she was trapped. Fine, you win. There's no baby. I just wanted to take what my sister couldn't. I thought I could steal John away and get back at her at the same time. John sat there, looking devastated. He had been manipulated again, and this time it was even worse. If you truly cared about him, you wouldn't have lied. This was never about love. It was about money, just like with Lisa. But John deserves better than this. Hannah stood up, slamming her hands on the table. I hate you all. You ruined everything. And with that, she stormed out, leaving a heavy silence in her wake. John looked completely lost, unsure of what to say or do. His mother wiped tears from her eyes, while Mark and I exchanged knowing glances. John, we can't keep living like this. I can't protect you forever. And this isn't good for either of us. John said nothing, but his face spoke volumes. He knew I was right. A few days later, I went to the city office and picked up divorce papers. In the end, I decided to divorce John. Part of me still wanted to protect him, but I realized that my pity wasn't helping him grow. He didn't protest. It wasn't that he didn't care, but more that he didn't know how to fix things. Sometimes you just have to let go. Marriage can't be about one person always making sacrifices. Mark's words comforted me. John and I had gone through a lot, but in the end, it wasn't enough. Months passed, and I heard rumors that John and Hannah had briefly tried dating again. Unsurprisingly, it didn't work out, and it seemed that the entire office had grown tired of their drama. Meanwhile, I started to consider a fresh start. I had no special attachment to my current job, and I began to think about changing careers. I realized that my tendency to care for others had gone too far. I couldn't pour all of myself into someone else without getting something back. Maybe the only person who truly deserved that kind of unconditional love would be my own child someday. Before that, though, I'd have to find someone to love. I'm not sure if I'll find that person, but I'm not in a rush. For now, I just want to live my life and enjoy it. When I meet someone who can support me as much as I support them, that's when I'll know it's right. And maybe, just maybe, I'll finally find a relationship that works both ways.